My sister stole my identity to get a job, so I stole her identity to ruin her reputation. I found out about it when my credit score dropped by 200 points overnight. The notification hit my phone at 3 in the morning, and I thought it was some kind of mistake. I'd been building my credit for years, paying off my student loans religiously, never missing a payment. But there it was, staring at me from my banking app, a massive red warning that made my stomach drop to the floor. The next morning, I called the credit bureau and spent 4 hours on hold, listening to the same terrible jazz music on repeat. When I finally got through, the representative told me someone had opened 3 credit cards and taken out a personal loan using my social security number. The applications had been approved because they matched my employment history perfectly. Someone knew exactly what they were doing, and they had access to information that only someone close to me would know. I started digging deeper, requesting copies of all the applications and spending my entire weekend going through paperwork. When they arrived a week later, I couldn't believe what I was seeing spread across my kitchen table. The handwriting was familiar, the phone number was 1 digit off from mine, and the emergency contact was our mother. My younger sister had stolen my identity, used my credentials to land a job at a marketing firm downtown, and then used that employment verification to open credit accounts. She'd been living in my shadow for years, always comparing herself to me, always feeling like she came up short. I'd graduated college first, gotten a stable job, bought my own apartment while she struggled. She dropped out twice, bounced between retail jobs, and still lived with our parents at 26. But I never imagined she'd go this far, that she'd actually steal my entire identity to build herself up. I confronted her at Sunday dinner, showing her the credit reports across the table while our parents watched in stunned silence. She didn't even deny it, didn't try to make excuses or claim it was a mistake. She just sat there, picking at her mashed potatoes with her fork, and said she'd been desperate. The job market was tough. She needed references she didn't have, and she thought she could fix everything before I found out. She promised to make it right, to pay everything back, to quit the job immediately and come clean. But making it right wasn't that simple, and I knew she was just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. The damage to my credit would take months to repair, maybe even years to fully recover from. I'd already been denied for a car loan I desperately needed, because my old car was breaking down constantly. My landlord was threatening to raise my rent, and I'd been planning to apply for a mortgage next year. All of those plans were now on hold because of her selfishness and complete disregard for my future. Our parents, predictably, took her side without even considering what this meant for me. They said she was going through a rough patch, that family should support each other, that I should be more understanding. They offered to help pay off the debt, but that wasn't the point at all. The point was that she'd violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible, and everyone expected me to just forgive and forget like nothing had happened. I decided I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not this time. If she could steal my identity, then I could play the same game and see how she liked it. I started researching her new job, scrolling through the marketing firm's website, checking out their social media presence. They were a small company, maybe 30 employees, the kind of place where reputation mattered and word traveled fast through the office. I knew all of her passwords because she'd never been good with security, always using the same combinations. She used variations of the same password for everything, usually involving our childhood dog's name and her birth year. I logged into her email account and found exactly what I expected, plus some things that made me even angrier. She'd been lying about her qualifications, claiming to have a degree she never earned, listing previous jobs where she'd been fired for attendance issues as glowing references. But I also found something else that made my blood boil and confirmed I was doing the right thing. She'd been bragging to her friends about how easy it was to fool everyone, how stupid I was for not catching on sooner. Screenshots of text messages where she called me a naive pushover, where she laughed about how long it took me to figure out what she'd done. She'd even joked about doing it again if she ever needed to, like my identity was just something she could borrow whenever convenient. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do, and I felt completely justified in my plan. I created a fake social media account using her information and started posting things that would raise eyebrows at her workplace. Nothing illegal, Nothing that would get me in serious trouble, but enough to plant seeds of doubt about her character and judgment. I studied her writing style, her favorite phrases, the way she talked about things online. I posted photos of expensive purchases she couldn't afford on her salary, tagged locations during work hours that were nowhere near her office. I shared opinions that directly contradicted the company's values, made comments on controversial topics that would make her seem unprofessional. I was careful to make it look authentic, like someone who just didn't understand the consequences of oversharing online. The first sign that my plan was working came when I noticed her panic texting our mutual friends. She discovered someone was impersonating her online, and she was freaking out about how it might affect her job. She'd figured out how to file reports with the social media platforms, but the damage was already spreading faster than she could contain it. Her coworkers had started noticing the posts, and I knew this because I'd been monitoring the company's internal communications through her work email. People were taking screenshots, sharing them in group chats, questioning whether she was really the person they thought she was. The professional image she'd carefully crafted was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The situation escalated when her supervisor called her into a meeting about her online presence. I watched through her email as she tried to explain that someone was impersonating her, that none of the controversial posts were actually hers. But the evidence was overwhelming, and her explanations sounded desperate and unconvincing. The company started investigating her background more thoroughly, which is when they discovered the discrepancies in her resume. Within 2 weeks, she was fired from the job she'd stolen my identity to get. Not just for the social media issues, but for falsifying her qualifications and lying during the interview process. The company also reported her to industry contacts, effectively blacklisting her from similar positions in the area. She'd gone from thinking she was so clever to being completely shut out of the field she'd tried to break into. But I wasn't finished with her yet, not by a long shot. I knew she'd probably try to use my identity again, especially now that she was desperate and unemployed. So I set up alerts on all my accounts, froze my credit, and started monitoring her activities more closely. I also reached out to some of her former employers, anonymously tipping them off about her tendency to lie on applications. The beauty of my revenge was that it was poetic justice at its finest. She'd stolen my identity to build herself up, so I'd stolen hers to tear her down. She'd used my reputation to get ahead, so I'd destroyed hers to level the playing field. Every consequence she faced was a direct result of the choices she'd made, and I felt no guilt about accelerating the process. Our parents were furious when they found out what I'd done to their precious baby. They accused me of being vindictive, of taking things too far, of ruining her life over money that could be repaid. But they didn't understand that this was never about money. It was about respect and boundaries. They'd enabled her behavior for years, always making excuses, always bailing her out when she messed up. She tried to get back at me by reporting me to the police, claiming I'd committed identity theft and harassment. But I'd been careful to cover my tracks, and besides, she'd have to admit to her own crimes to pursue charges against me. The police took her statement, but didn't seem particularly interested in investigating someone who'd started the whole mess by stealing someone else's identity. The final twist came when she tried to apply for unemployment benefits after losing her job. The state system flagged her application because of inconsistencies in her work history that I'd helped create. The identity theft had created a paper trail that connected her to multiple fraudulent applications, not just the ones involving me. She'd been using fake references and doctored documents for years, building a house of cards that finally collapsed. She ended up having to move back in with our parents permanently, her tail between her legs. Her credit was destroyed, her professional reputation was in ruins, and she couldn't get hired anywhere in town. She'd learned the hard way that stealing someone's identity doesn't just affect their credit score. It affects their entire life in ways they never imagined. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd accused me of ruining her life when she'd been systematically destroying her own for years. I just accelerated the process and made sure she faced the consequences of her choices without anyone rushing to save her. Sometimes karma needs a little help, and I was happy to provide it with both hands. 6 months later, my credit score had recovered completely, and I was back on track with my life. I'd gotten the car loan I needed. My landlord had backed down on the rent increase, and I was back on track for that mortgage application. Meanwhile, she was working at a grocery store under our mother's constant supervision, her dreams of a professional career effectively over. I don't regret what I did for even a second, and I'd do it again if necessary. She'd crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed, violated a trust that couldn't be repaired. If she'd just asked for help, if she'd been honest about her struggles, I might have been willing to support her. But she chose deception and theft instead, and she got exactly what she deserved. The relationship between us is permanently damaged, probably beyond repair at this point. Our parents still think I went too far, but they've stopped pressuring me to forgive her after seeing the evidence. They've seen how she operates, how she lies and manipulates to get what she wants. They've realized that enabling her behavior only makes things worse for everyone involved. She's tried reaching out a few times, sending long emails about how sorry she is, how she's learned her lesson. But I've learned not to trust her words, because her actions showed me who she really is. Blood relationships don't excuse betrayal, and forgiveness has to be earned, not demanded from family members. The whole experience taught me that family doesn't give you a free pass to hurt people without consequences. She made her choices, and now she has to live with the results every single day. I've moved on with my life, but I still monitor my credit regularly and keep my personal information locked down tight. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild, especially when someone shows you their true character. She taught me that lesson the hard way, and I made sure she learned it too. Sometimes the best revenge is simply making sure someone faces the natural consequences of their actions without anyone rushing to save them from themselves. But the story doesn't end there, because life has a way of bringing people back into your orbit. About a year later, I was at a coffee shop when I overheard two women talking about a new employee at their company. They were discussing how someone had falsified their resume and gotten fired within a week when the truth came out. The description sounded familiar, so I casually asked what company they worked for. It turned out to be the same industry where my sister had been blacklisted, and sure enough, they were talking about her. She tried to reinvent herself with a new name and fake references, but the professional community in our city was smaller than she'd realized. Word had gotten around about her reputation, and now she couldn't get hired anywhere in her field. I felt a moment of satisfaction, knowing that my actions had created lasting consequences. She couldn't just wait for things to blow over and start fresh somewhere else. The damage to her professional reputation was permanent, a constant reminder of what happens when you betray the people closest to you. The conversation also revealed something else interesting. The women mentioned that their company had started doing more thorough background checks because of incidents like this. My sister's behavior had actually led to policy changes that would protect other employers from similar fraud. In a way, her actions had created a positive outcome for everyone except herself. I never told our parents about this encounter, but it reinforced my belief that I'd done the right thing. Some people need to face serious consequences before they'll change their behavior. My sister had been given countless chances to be honest and responsible, and she'd chosen to lie and cheat instead. The last time I saw her was at our grandmother's funeral 2 years later. She looked different, older somehow, worn down by the weight of her choices. She tried to approach me during the reception, but I simply walked away. There was nothing left to say between us, no relationship left to salvage. Our mutual friends had all taken sides by then, most of them supporting me once they learned the full story. The ones who remained neutral had gradually drifted away from both of us. Her actions had rippled through our entire social circle, affecting relationships that had nothing to do with the original conflict. I heard through the grapevine that she'd eventually found work in a completely different field, something that didn't require the qualifications she'd lied about. She was apparently doing better, but she'd had to rebuild her entire life from scratch. The career she dreamed of was permanently out of reach because of her own choices. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far, if there might have been a better way to handle the situation. But then I remember the text messages where she laughed about stealing my identity, the casual way she dismissed my feelings and my future. She'd shown no remorse until she got caught, and even then, her apologies felt hollow and self-serving. The experience changed me in ways I didn't expect. I became more cautious about who I trusted, more protective of my personal information. I learned that people can surprise you in the worst possible ways, even people you've known your entire life. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and family members can hurt you more deeply than strangers ever could. But I also learned that I was stronger than I'd realized. I'd stood up for myself when everyone else wanted me to just accept the situation. I'd refused to be a victim, choosing instead to take control of my own narrative. Looking back, I'm proud of how I handled it, even if the methods were unconventional. The whole situation taught me valuable lessons about justice, consequences, and the importance of standing up for yourself. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who think they can get away with it because of your shared history. They count on your love and loyalty to protect them from the consequences of their actions. My sister learned that family connections don't shield you from accountability. I learned that sometimes you have to be your own advocate, even when it means going against the people you love. We both learned that actions have consequences, and those consequences can last far longer than anyone expects. In the end, I got my life back on track, while she had to rebuild hers from the ground up. The identity she'd stolen couldn't give her what she was really looking for: self-respect, genuine accomplishment, and real relationships built on trust. Those things can't be borrowed or stolen from someone else. I sleep well at night knowing that justice was served, even if I had to serve it myself. My sister made her choices, and I made mine. We both have to live with the consequences, and I'm completely at peace with that reality.